Oh, look, it didn't even ask you to confirm anything. That's good. All right, so.
Okay. It's not. So last week I noticed that I figure it was you, but I was masked. Is that right? I was up in that corner
Right.
of the screen. I was.
Right.
That's the way. That's just the normal.
Yes.
Person who opens the. Okay. That could be Kathy.
Miss Barnett, can you hear us?
I can. How are you guys?
We're well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thanks for being willing to find time in your very, very busy schedule.
It's crazy. It is crazy.
So as you know, we don't start for another 12 minutes or so. You can feel free to please, if you need to do any more preparation or anything at all, feel free to do that. You don't need to sit here and entertain us.
Okay, well, got a lot of emails, so
yes,
sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I would just put myself on mute. I'll put myself on mute and just work. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm Lee and this is Aaron.
Oh, yes.
So we know each other.
Are you the pastor?
So I'm the associate pastor here of education and youth here at Abington Presbyterian Church, and Lee has been the man behind our Adult Forum series, and so I'm grateful to him for doing all this planning.
Thank you very much. Is it just, how much time do I have with you guys?
Roughly from 8:45 to 9:30 or beyond, about 45 minutes, I would guess.
Okay, and what is the forum? Is it me just introducing myself and then opening the floor to questions?
I thought I would introduce you with the information that I have received, and then it will be up to you. If you'd like to speak, often for 10 or 15, 20 minutes, and open it to questions, however you want to do that. It's up to you.
Okay, what exactly do you have as my bio that you're going to introduce?
I have it off the computer. Mom, veteran, author, political commentator.
Okay.
About Kathy Barnette.
Yeah.
Okay. Starts out appearing regularly on national TV and radio. That's the first phrase.
Okay.
Is that okay?
It is okay. Yes. The whole pig farm and all that, is that a part of that?
I know she mentioned the pig farm. I'm sure they'll be interested to hear about.
Well, allow me to share that portion of my story, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
By the way, normally we have it, it depends, anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 persons who might be involved in the discussion. We never know.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going on mute.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, I don't know if it's
Hello, Bill.
Hi, Chuck.
How are you doing? Sorry about your loss.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Doing okay. The girls are doing okay too.
Good. I'm back at working in Bryn Mawr 1 week and then home 2 weeks, then work in Bryn Mawr 1 week and then home 2 weeks. Started that October 5th, so tomorrow I'll be back in Bryn Mawr for the week.
You looking forward to getting back?
Yeah, and I kind of like, if in the long term, I prefer to be part-time in and part-time out. I do think communication isn't as good when you're working from home. And especially as an auditor where you're dealing with some of the other people. Now, some aren't in our state office. I mean, they're not in Bryn Mawr anyway, but a lot are. And it's just trying to follow up and get responses is much better when you can walk over to somebody's desk versus, and you can have sidebar discussions much easier than you can if you're on Zoom or something.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the next installment in our Adult Forum series. Before I turn it over to Lee, I just want to say two things. One is I'm Aaron Twitchell, Associate Pastor here at APC. Lee and I will be socially distant here in my office. It's possible to do that, except for these few seconds as I introduce this presentation. But I just want to say two things. Number one is please mute yourselves at this time. And when our speaker is ready, she will invite questions. And at that point, if you are going to ask a question, you, of course, can unmute yourself. But we ask that otherwise you remain muted to minimize distractions. And then the second thing I want to say is that this presentation is being recorded so that we can put it up on our YouTube channel for later viewing. Please feel free to pass that information along to anyone who might want to see this presentation at a later time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lee Bowie.
Thank you, Aaron. And thank all of you who joined us this morning. There will be a few more who are coming in. This is often the way it is. So just be patient and hopefully we'll have a few more participants. We're very fortunate to have with us this morning, Kathy Barnette. And I have a bit of a bio that she's provided us with, defining herself as a mom, a veteran, an author, and political commentator. Appearing regularly on national TV and radio, Kathy Barnette's first book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, Being Black and Conservative in America, explains why liberal policies have failed the Black community time and time again, and will fail the larger American community as Democrats rush to the hard left of the party. Kathy is a veteran, a former adjunct professor of corporate finance, sought after conference speaker, as well as a conservative political commentator. Kathy has decided to take on Washington, D.C. and is running for Congress for the 4th Congressional District. She served her country proudly for 10 years in the Armed Forces Reserves, where she was accepted into officer candidate school. Her corporate career includes working with 2 major financial firms and in corporate America. Kathy sat on the board of a pregnancy crisis center for 5 years, and perhaps her most cherished opportunity to date, besides being a wife, is the ability to homeschool her 2 children. They just started their 6th year of homeschooling. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy, except to say to all of us, when we ask our questions and participate, we know we do that in a respectful fashion, even though we may have differing opinions than our speakers. So please, everyone keep that in mind. And Kathy, please go ahead with your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Let me get myself over here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come and speak with you. I truly appreciate it. So thank you for being here very early. My name is Kathy Barnette, and I am running for Congress in the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. And running for Congress was not on my bucket list of things to do. As was already mentioned, I had my own life doing my own thing. I was not groomed for this moment, and yet I find myself here. Just to give you a little bit of a background of who I am, I was a little Black girl who grew up on a pig farm in Southern Alabama. I grew up below the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back, and a well on the side. But because no one told me I was a victim, because no one told me I might as well not try, all the odds are against me, you don't have those kind of privileges, I became the first in my family to go and finish college. I spent 10 years in the US Army Reserves, where I was accepted into officer candidacy school. I worked in the financial industry, corporate finance, an adjunct professor of corporate finance. I speak to millions on almost a daily basis in national media. I authored my first book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, Being Black and Conservative in America, that went #1 on Amazon 2 months in a row. And now I'm running for Congress. So from a pig farm to Congress, only in America. I believe my story represents all that is good about this country. I believe my story represents the fact that we are still a land of hope and opportunity, and that is why over 1 million people become legalized residents in this country every single year. I am running, this time last year, I was sitting on the floor with my children, homeschooling them. I am not homeschooling them any longer. I cannot possibly run for Congress and homeschool them at the exact same time. But last year, we were in our 6th year of doing just that. And it dawned on me, a lot of parents now are homeschooling, not by choice. And they are all realizing that it is not for the weak of heart. It is an all-consuming occupation. And it dawned on me, what exactly are my children going to inherit? That was last year about this time. And it got me to looking for other ways that I could serve my country. I believe our country is in trouble. And I believe our country needs to have people who have the ability to have nuanced conversations, who have lived a life with a variety of journeys and backgrounds and perspectives, and who come to the table loving my nation and wanting to see everyone do well. So with that, I would love to open the floor to questions and conversations.
Kathy, this is Bill Gustafson. You said the country is in trouble. How would you define the trouble? And what would be your solutions for this trouble?
Yeah, thank you so very much. I heard earlier someone give you condolences, so I can only imagine. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
This time last year, I was watching a second attempt at impeaching a president. And whether you agree with that or not is not of any real significance, other than at that particular time, I started looking around and started, just asking the question, what exactly are we getting for the effort and the money and the time and the angst and the anxiety that is going around in our country right now at that particular time? Followed by that, I was watching my opponent and other Democrats in the House come up with a new immigration bill. And most of us would readily admit that we need to reform our immigration. However, most of us would think that our leaders would take Americans into consideration. And as I printed the new bill off, this time last year, I had no idea I would be running for Congress. And I'm reading it, each section of that bill I found to be utterly ridiculous. And then it gets to the bottom of the bill, it's called Right to Return Home. And meaning that if the bill became law, it will become retroactive, and everyone that we deported would have the right to come home, and we as taxpayers would have the honor of paying for that ticket. And I just thought that was really, not a very nuanced conversation. And so that was really, the precipice of me beginning to think differently, like, what else can I do? I had no idea COVID would happen. I had no idea that 2020 would be as ridiculous as it is. I had no idea that China would release a local virus and allow it to travel the nation and harm so many people. I had no idea that our economies would be impacted. I had no idea about the rioting and the looting, um, the Black Lives Matter movement. I had no idea about people taking over, commandeering whole city blocks, and upending our nation. And so those are some of the issues that were that have become, at the forefront of my mind. Some of the things I would do in regards to that. I mean, again, I think we have to have very nuanced conversations in our country. It cannot be either or, black or white, this way or that. It has to take into consideration that we are multifaceted people and we come from different perspectives and backgrounds. As it relates to China, I believe China needs to pay for the over 200,000 American lives that have been lost, for the economies that have been hampered. And no one is having that conversation. If you didn't know any better and just listen to what people are saying, you would think Donald Trump cooked up COVID and released it on the nation. No one is talking about China. I believe we have a very small window to get to incentivize our manufacturers to bring the manufacturing of our critical medical supplies back to this nation. Also, if you take a look, I know everyone is very focused domestically, but we need to pay very close attention to what is happening internationally. China, the mask has been removed, and they have become the roaring lion that so many of us have been warning about. And they are not playing with us, what they're doing in the South China Seas. But even more than that, the agreement they just entered into with Iran. Turkey is not happy that Arab nations are looking for peace. And now Turkey is going to be a problem. Russia is going to be a problem. And we need leaders who are going to be able to have an honest dialogue about it and a nuanced dialogue about it.
We know that housing is always an issue in a political campaign. As I understand, in Montgomery County, there is some low-income housing. Do you support, I guess, the implementation of housing for folks who are in the lower income range?
Yeah, again, this is a nuance, one of those nuance. I think the word nuance needs to become the word of the year. For example, we have a lot of issues in our nation as well as in this district. Did you guys know Montgomery County is the second wealthiest county in the state of Pennsylvania? Bob your head. Yes, no, you guys didn't know that? Yeah. There's a lot of wealth here. I've had the opportunity to be in the room with a lot of it lately. And yet, why do we have food deserts in Montgomery County? Do you guys know what food deserts are? There are people in our district that cannot hop in their car and within, less than 5 minutes be at a Giant. They are trapped in a situation where there are no grocery stores that offer quality food at a reasonable price. So we have food deserts here. I find that to be astounding, to be in the second wealthiest county, and there are people who are living in such a manner. I believe, also, I was shocked to find out in the second wealthiest county in the state of Pennsylvania that we have pockets where there is 25 to 30% below poverty level. I find that to be astounding. I also found it to be astounding. I told you guys, I grew up on a pig farm. I clawed my way from underneath a rock. It was extremely dire poverty. And I know the three things that allowed me to get off that pig farm. And it's not rocket science. One was education. I do not believe everyone needs to go to a four-year college. I don't believe everyone wants to go to a four-year college, but I believe that people should have the opportunity to receive a skill set. I met with about 30 manufacturing facilities in the Pottstown area, and I was surprised that all of them said, when I get to DC, there are two things they want me to work on. One is fairer, more equitable trade agreements with China. And two, trade schools. They said they have jobs, but they don't have a pool of skilled workers from which to pull from. And so education got me off that pig farm. Secondly, was getting a job, any job. And I know when I talk to some people, they're like, no, you need to wait for the right job, which I find to be a very privileged statement, because when you're living under a rock, you can't sit back and wait for the right job to come your way. You need to get a job that allows you to have skill sets and soft skills and to be able to move up. The third thing I did to get off that pig farm was I waited to get married before I had children. Those are not rocket science. It's the same things that I'm sure you probably taught your children as well that needs to be taught going forward, all three of those things. So getting back, we have food deserts here in addition to homelessness. We have, pockets where there are 25 to 30% poverty rates, where that's where people are living. And third, we have, I don't know if you guys know this, but in almost every school district in our very wealthy county, by the time a Black or Black or Hispanic child who receive free or reduced lunch, meaning they're poorer than the norm, by the time they get into the third grade, you begin to see this academic performance disparity that takes place that never corrects itself. And now that we're in a situation where we have so many of our schools resorting to virtual or hybrid, that gap that already takes place is going to be widened, right? Never to correct itself again. I've done a couple of debates or forums with my opponent, and when the question of education comes up, she throws out the normal solution: more money. Wissahickon, for example, a very nice area, their annual budget is over $100 million for their students. Each student gets roughly $21,000 to $22,000. That's a lot of money. And yet it was Wissahickon where I saw the very first spread. Money is not the solution to that. Throwing more money, raising more taxes is not the solution to that. We need people who understand what poverty tastes like, what it feels like, what is needed to come alongside, whether we're talking about homelessness, food deserts, education for those who find themselves below the bottom line, how to bring in jobs, right? The word jobs is not even on my opponent's website. We need jobs in this nation. That's how you get people off the street. That's how you get people out of homelessness, out of food deserts, into a better education environment. Jobs. It's all about jobs. It's not about another government program. It's about jobs. Coming from where I came from, I've never seen a government program take anyone out of poverty. Never. And I have a lot, and I have a lot of family still in Alabama and in other places who are living in poverty. Government programs have never gotten anyone out of poverty. It has never solved the homelessness crisis. It has never solved the education crisis. It has never solved the poverty or the food desert crisis. Jobs do that.
Ms. Barnett, thank you so much for being with us. I serve as pastor at Abington Presbyterian Church, and we're so thankful for you giving your time to help
Thank
us
you.
know about you and your views. You were talking about jobs. Let me ask for your view about minimum wage. If someone works full-time for minimum wage, they will still be under the poverty level, under Pennsylvania's current minimum wage. Do you advocate for a higher federal minimum wage, or is that totally up to employers as to what they should pay their employees?
No, I do not advocate for raising the minimum wage to what most people are talking about, $15 an hour. I think that's utterly ridiculous. And I don't think that it's viable. My background is finance. I worked with Bank of America Capital Asset Management and AG Edwards. I taught corporate finance. I understand how models work, and I understand what corporations will do. For example, in New York, they raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And my children and I, when I would go to New York for media, Fox or CNN or whatever, we would always make time to walk down Times Square, and there's a McDonald's right in front of those red bleachers. I don't know if you guys ever been there and saw that. And every time we would go there and we'll get an ice cream cone and we'll go sit on the bleachers and just watch people because it's fascinating. And we do that every time. One time we walked in and all of a sudden they completely refitted the area. And in the place of employees, people, there were maybe about 10 of those ordering machines. I don't know what they call, right? And very few employees, because that's what corporations will do for minimum skilled workers. I believe instead of forcing people to pay $15 an hour, that we turn to the individuals and we give them the opportunity to increase their skill sets, which then allows them to command a higher salary. Again, I grew up on a pig farm. I would never expect someone with the skill sets that I had coming off the pig farm to pay me $15 an hour. And I did not get my first, I didn't have any insurance. I didn't get insurance until I got my first job out of college. So I understand poverty, and I understand the heart to want to solve the issue. But we have to live in the world of reality of what happens when we go to corporations and say, I'm going to force you to do this. They say, okay, thank you very much. And now, by human instinct, we begin to look for, how do I reduce my cost of goods? One of the largest cost of goods is employees. And so I'm going to go get machines, or I'm going to outsource to other nations. Like, for example, my opponent, she amassed the bulk of her wealth with her family bike business by participating in sweatshops in China. You can Google that from Philadelphia Inquirer. So my opponent comes to America and she advocates for $15 an hour. And yet, with her own family business, she participates in sweatshops in China, paying people $1.49 an hour to $2.20. So I get it. It sounds good for those of us who want to eradicate poverty. I most certainly want to eradicate poverty. I know exactly what it feels like to open up an empty refrigerator door and wonder where my next meal is going to come from. I know exactly what it feels like to sit in a dark room because my single parent mother cannot pay for both the light bill and the rent. And because I understand that when you begin to raise, and because I understand economics and how the world works, how corporations work, you close that door for someone like me who When I got my first job at a McDonald's and then at a Burger King, that was huge for me to be able to get that first job. It allowed me to get some income. It allowed me to, to be able to get gas in my car to travel back and forth to school. It allowed me to get a proper coat for winter. And when you begin to now force companies to raise their minimum wage, they don't look at people like me anymore. They go and get a machine to do it, or they outsource it to another nation to do it. And now me needing that job with little to no real viable skills to command $15 an hour. Come on. I recognize I didn't have a lot of skill sets, hence the reason why I went to college. And again, I don't believe everyone should go to college, nor do I think everyone wants to go to college. But we should be able to provide people with the opportunity. I think that's the better conversation, is not how we can become a socialist nation, but how we can give people the opportunity to get to improve their skill sets, so that your skill sets will require a higher wage. Thank you for your question.
So you've done an amazing job with coming from a very difficult start. I think most people don't have the capability to do what you did, or maybe the support of family, or the many things that you to overcome the many things that you've overcome. So we need, you mentioned education as a way to improve things. I think you spoke about trade schools that would plug into jobs, which I think is great. But we still have the issue with the third grader who starts falling behind very quickly.
Yeah.
What's your plan for dealing with that issue, so that we could put everybody on a good path forward right from the start?
I love you guys. Y'all ask really great questions. Thank you. That is such a wonderful question. If I pivoted my camera, I don't know if I can do that, you guys can see, but I don't think you're gonna see it. Above my wall, above my office door, I have stenciled, "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave" by Frederick Douglass. If I pivot my camera over here, you can see my books. Education is everything. Education is everything. Education is everything in order of getting people the opportunity that we want people to have. You guys don't want people to be impoverished. I can tell that. So what do? It's not about throwing more money, unless of course there is no money. But just taking Wissahickon, $22,000 per child. That's a ton of money. That's a lot of money to have those kind of disparities. So for example, a portion of that money is supposed to go, the school is supposed to use it to come alongside the family. For example, let me put it this way. If my family, as poor as we was forced to do virtual schooling or hybrid schooling, it would have been the final nail in the coffin of my family. I think it would have been the death knell for us. There is no way. We would have been lost to the streets. Going to school made sure I had at least one hot meal a day. That's how serious it was for us at times. And so, one, jobs. I'm going to always come back to jobs, because I've seen the power of a good job, right? Because when you bring jobs into an environment and into those particular families whose family is poor, for example, my children are now in Lower Moreland, and they're hybrid. And so what I get to do that my mother would have never been able to do is I get to hire a tutor to come in and to make sure my son who's taking CP classes do not fall behind with geometry and physics, right? I get to do that because I have a job, a really good job that allows me the ability to do that for my children. And so one, I'm always going to come back to job because I've seen the power of a job in my own life. Secondly, a portion of that money, the $22,000, is supposed to be allocated to coming alongside those particular families that are in need. So understanding the language of poverty, that money can go around that family to bring those parents into the school. How do you use the computer? How do you know what your kid is learning? I mean, like, this has been such a challenge for me of keeping up with my children. And now that everything is virtual or hybrid and everything, they don't bring textbooks home anymore, right? So I can't just thumb through their textbooks. I need to know how to go into the computer, pull up their classes, look at their grades, look to see how they did on a test, which questions they got right, which one they got wrong. And so the school is supposed to use a portion of their money to go and to bring the parents in order to do that. Another thing is tutoring, right? I can afford, by the grace of God, to be able to tutor, to bring in tutors into my children's environment, but everyone can't do that. So I'm thinking of why not take a portion of that money that is supposed to be allocated to assist the family and have tutoring provided during the course of the day. Here, my son, he takes like two, I forget what they actually call them, but twice a day, they have time set aside just for study. My daughter as well, I saw that. Take one of those blocks of time and have tutoring. And perhaps, maybe not for all the students, right? Some students don't need tutoring as much as others, but identifying those at-risk students and having them go to a tutor to help them, right? Some additional math, some additional science, some additional social studies or history, but identifying it and being very nuanced in the conversation. That my mother, when we were growing up, I mean, I don't think she ever opened up one of my books and helped me with my work. Having a tutor would have been huge for me, right? And knowing that that resource existed and that I had access to that, right? My mother wanted me to have a good education, but because she's single parent, which most of these children would probably come from if statistics bears out any in those situations. So my mother want better for me, but not really knowing what that looks like. I mean, it's amazing what you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know until someone puts a spotlight on it. And now you're aware.
It doesn't work with your finger.
So I thank you for that answer. I guess it sounds like we should have tutors in addition to teachers for to make the school system work better.
I mean, well, that's what I'm doing with my children and most people, Sylvan Learning. I mean, like, that's tutoring, right? And so it's something that we've been doing forever, but typically you have to be of some financial means and the wherewithal to get that for your child, right? And so we do it anyway.
How do you?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. If you don't have the wherewithal, how does your child manage to move forward properly in school?
Yeah, and that's why I said a portion of that money already is supposed to be spent on coming around the families. A portion of that $22,000, so you don't have to come up with new money. A portion of that money is already supposed to be spent of coming around the family to do things like teaching them how to turn on a computer, how to find your kids' classes, right? And so at the same time, that money can be spent on letting them know your kid is at risk. And these are the things we provided. And then just put, or, maybe not even asking the parents. And it's a part of the school curriculum. That's what they do anyway. They take all of these tests to figure out where kids are academically. And if you see that a kid is at risk or falling behind, then get that extra tutoring. That would have meant everything to me as a child and my two younger brothers.
So what about schools that don't have $22,000 per student to
Yeah.
work with?
And we,
Large group of people that are going to fall aside and will not be able to make that kind of money and never be able to pull themselves up.
I'm telling you, you guys are good. Thank you again for a very insightful question. Because remember, I talked about those pockets here that are 25 to 30% below the poverty level. So again, I'm going to go back to my number one thing. What is it? Jobs. For example, Pottstown has been identified as an opportunity zone. An opportunity zone means that this area falls 25 to 30% below the poverty level. And so now it's already a law that hundreds of millions of dollars of capital floods into this area, not taxes, government taxes, but we incentivize corporations to bring manufacturing or to bring their businesses to these particular areas, right? And with jobs come what? It comes homes, it comes grocery stores, it comes nice green parks and areas. The same thing we get to enjoy down here in the southern portion of our district. Now, not only stays here, but it moves up as well, right? Because with jobs, really good jobs, comes all of these other things that we get to enjoy. And with property, and with people purchasing home, now you have property taxes, which increases that. This is why, because I've seen it. I've lived through liberal policies playing out in predominantly Black neighborhoods. And I am here to tell you that there's a reason why 56 years later, because that's how long it's been since Lyndon B. Johnson to today, those neighborhoods have not improved. They've gotten worser, right? So when you bring worser, I don't know if that's a word, worse. So when you bring in jobs, it improves the situation. When you bring in a program, not so much. It teaches people to lower the bar of expectation. I don't have to work that hard. And I've seen it in my own life. And I've seen the other side when I moved out of those particular neighborhoods and I got to look at how other people are living and what exactly are they doing. Our nation is going to move very rapidly by the grace of God, hopefully, depending on who gets in office at all levels, of bringing manufacturing facilities back to this nation, bringing critical medical manufacturing back to this nation. We have Merck's here. We have, like I said, just in Pottstown alone, there were 32 manufacturing facilities. That equates to jobs. If you have someone who's willing to fight for you to bring those jobs into this area. So if we really care about poverty, pivot away from government programs and instead pivot towards how do we incentivize businesses to come into those areas. Now, the other thing that I just wrote up, and it's not on my website yet, but you can go to my website and a lot of this I delineated there. But another thing that I was just writing up a couple of days ago is I will advocate for a one-time emergency funding for, they call them scholarship granting organizations, that will authorize a one-time funding to provide families with direct educational assistance, including private school tuition, homeschooling expenses. Most parents right now are homeschooling, not by choice, but homeschooling, and that's quite expensive. So being able, when you're virtual or when you're hybrid, there's a large element of homeschooling that's going on. whether they're going to do that permanently or not. But you know how we're giving stimulus checks out to individuals already who are suffering right now. You're saying no? Can't hear you.
There is no stimulus right now.
No, and it's not going to be right now. Did you guys know that the reason why we're not getting that last stimulus check is because, unfortunately, Democrats put a poison pill. They defunded the police by $600 million. You can Google that. You can Google that. That's a fact. They defunded. That's a fact. You can Google it. You can Google it.
Miss Barnett,
Yes.
I was wondering if, just because I'm looking at the time, you mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement earlier on in your introduction, and our church is currently in the midst of finding our voice in this national conversation. Is there anything that you would like to say about either the Black Lives Matter movement or just the larger conversation on race that's taking place in our country? And then a second part of that question could be, is there anything that you would like to offer your perspective on the role that race, if any, has played in your campaign with your opponent?
Oh my goodness. I told y'all I grew up on a pig farm in Southern Alabama, right? By the time I came along, Jim Crow law was no longer the law of the land, but it was certainly, I could see the remnants of Jim Crow. Ugly. I could see it on my grandparents' faces. It's ugly. It is ugly. Let me see, how do you answer this? Let me just start off with being as direct as I possibly can. I am a Black woman married to a Black man raising Black babies. Black lives matter to me. And Black lives have been mattering to me since 1971. Black lives did not just start mattering to me because white people primarily are putting up little Black Lives Matter signs in their yard. It has always mattered to me. It has always been very important to me. And I can assure you, no one on this particular call cares more about Black lives than I do, right? So that's first and foremost. But I do not support Black Lives Matter Global Network Incorporated. They have spent the last couple of weeks scrubbing their website. But I took a screenshot when I first went out there, and they had a section called What We Believe. One of the things that a lot of what they believe is just utterly the antithesis of what any American should be espousing. But one of them goes against what I have spent my life trying to build, and that is a strong nuclear family. One of the things on their website, they've been scrubbing it, so I'm sure it's not out there any longer. But one of the things that they were espousing was to dismantle the Western normative of a nuclear family. I grew up in a single parent. You guys can, I'm telling you, you could just Google my life, it's out there. But for those who do not know, I am the byproduct of a rape. My mother was 11 years old when I was conceived, and my father was 21 years old. And so I can assure you that the village model does not protect the child. And I have worked very hard, my husband and I, to build what so many of you have enjoyed. And yet there are those who pivot to the Black community and say, we're going to dismantle that. Although you have enjoyed it and have reaped the benefits of it in raising that type of family. And so, so that, along with various other things that I've seen from Black Lives Matter Global Network Incorporated, I am vehemently opposed to the organization. So that's that. In 1863, we freed the nation, freed roughly 3 million Black people. We were free, but we were not equal. It took 101 years later, 1964, before we introduced the Civil Rights Bill. And although we are on the path towards equality, we have not fully arrived in this nation. There are those like myself before who are marginalized in this nation. There are those who are underrepresented. And we need to make sure that we do our part and to be able to bring people into the shared prosperity of this nation, right? I had a wonderful education being in the Wall Street environment and watching how all of that happens. And it was a stark contrast from the pig farm, right? But right now, we have those who are running around telling Black people that our number one issue is police brutality. That is not our number one issue. And I can go into that if you guys want me to speak to that. That is not the Black community's number one issue. I believe the number one issue right now for the Black community is financial inclusion. I believe financial inclusion into the shared prosperity of this nation is the second civil rights movement for Black folks. But because white progressive liberals are hijacking our moment, talking about police, having everybody running around talking about policing, let's defund the police, let's abolish the police, let's reimagine policing, let's have social workers come out with the police officers. You know, I mean, they're hijacking of a moment that is very much needed. And it has wakened me up in the middle of the night that at the end of all of this, Black folks are going to be left with broken windows and having listened to some pretty fine speeches. But then what? Our children are still going to be living in some of the worst neighborhoods, attending some of the worst schools, food deserts everywhere when you come into our neighborhoods. And we're not going to have gained very much in this moment. Under this spotlight, we have the heart of the nation that is paying attention. And we're over here running around talking about policing. I believe that where there is, racism exists. You will never hear me say it doesn't. I've seen it. I felt it. It is ugly. And it still exists today. And like a surgeon with the scalpel, we should be able to go in and dig that rot out and keep it moving. But instead, we have those who are weaponizing the color of my skin, weaponizing the history of this nation to radically reimagine my country. And I'm opposed to that. I believe, again, financial inclusion. If you go to my website at kathybarnett4congress.com, I've written it out. It's pretty long, maybe about 4 pages, maybe about 5 pages of just kind of walking people through where we are, what is needed. This is the nuanced conversation that I'm talking about. And the latest poll, 84% of Black folks say they want policing. When my opponent defunds the police by $600 million, slips in a poison pill, knowing that the Republican Party is not going to pick that bill up, knowing people need a stimulus, but now they're not going to get it because no one is going to pick up a dirty bill. You have people, your communities in Abington is not going to be defunded. It's not going to be hampered at all because whatever the federal government no longer provides to your policing, your tax dollars will make sure that your policing is at its best. But when you start going into Black and brown neighborhoods, they lack the property tax base that you have. And so when the government defunds their policing in any manner, they don't have the resources to make sure they're getting adequate funding, right? And now we can say, oh, we're going to trust the government. Oh, the government, another program. It's not the way it should work. So that's my thought on Black Lives Matter, on the moment that we find ourselves in. I have a whole lot to say. I believe, again, just in short, we're at the financial inclusion is the second civil rights movement, not another government takeover, or another government program, or another welfare program, but it's financial inclusion. I know a tremendous amount about poverty. I know a whole lot about what liberal policies have done to Black communities. I've seen it, and we're looking at it. when you talk about systemic racism, I believe there is such a thing as institutional racism. And which now causes me to pivot and look at the institutions. For example, look at Minnesota. The governor is a Democrat. The attorney general is a Democrat. Amy Klobuchar in the Senate is a Democrat. Ilhan Omar in the House of Representatives is a Democrat. The chief of police, where Freddie Gray was murdered, is a Democrat. The city council, 13 out of the 15 are Democrat. The mayor, a Democrat. So when you look at institutional racism, you need to take a look at the institutions that are running those particular areas. And you need to say, there's not a conservative thought in the bunch. They're all Democrats. And it's the kind of environment in which I grew up in. It's all Democrat. You can't find a Republican in these inner cities. And it is these urban areas that are burning down to the ground. So if we want to talk about institutional racism, let's take a look at those who are sitting at the top of those areas, because at any time that they wanted to get rid of chokehold, they did not need the federal government to do it. They could have done it anytime they wanted to, but they didn't.
Kathy, we want to thank you for coming this morning and sharing with us. You've had a very, very busy schedule. We appreciate your squeezing us in to hear your very thoughtful and indeed important comments. So thank you again for coming and speaking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Blessings.
Blessings. Thank you.